G'day everyone, welcome back to another Loaded Dice Plays video. I am Loaded Dice. So here we are, let's finish up this Hydra series and we can all call this done, put a pin in it and we'll be able to move on. What I want to do here is start on a high, so I'm going to look to cover Zola first. I am very high on Zola, and spoiler alert, I'm not very high on Strucker, but we'll get to him later. So Zola, let's start him off really quickly. So 2, 3, 4 defensive stats, they were a little bit... how's it going on the weekend? I wasn't too happy with them. The throws in particular, he does not like anything being thrown at him. He takes damage very quickly. He has 6 health though, which is great for a 3 threat. He is 3 threat. Size 3, which was handy a couple of times, and he's a short mover. So the short move was a little bit of an issue, but he does get around it with his medium base, so it's not as bad as having a small base, small mover. The size 3, like I said, it was a little bit handy with just a couple of pushes here and there. There was a couple of size 2 ones, which he was able to negate. The 2 physical defense is probably his biggest downfall, just because of the dodge rolls as well. And foreshadowing a bit, the Hydra engineering does not give you rerolls to your dodge rolls, and neither does strategic genius. So he's kind of just picking up those 2 dice and hoping for the best. So that was probably his biggest downfall on the weekend, I found. But overall, those stats are fine, with the exception of 2 physical defense is something you might have to play with and work around and try to pick up your matchups as well. So moving on to the rest of his data sheet, we'll start with his attacks, the prototype weapons. A range 4 dice attack is absolutely fine. The range 4 is what makes it fine. Before choosing your target, you do get to pick which type you want, so you are usually attacking on their worst defense. So a lot of times you do get to go into, it's usually 4 into 3, sometimes better. So before choosing your target, you do get to choose what attack type you want to use. It can be energy, physical, or mystic. So a lot of times what that actually works out to be is that it's going to be 4 dice into 3, sometimes 2 if you're lucky, but that's kind of the way that will generally work out, which means you do get to push damage a little bit more often than you would expect. But the benefit for this attack for me is the fact that it is a gainer. He just gains 1 power no matter what, and the way his the rest of his card works, he loves just automatically gaining that power, because being able to plan out what you can do with his power and his turn is absolutely fantastic, with the exception of Scientific Hubris, which we're going to get to later. But Focused ESP Box Blast. Wow, imagine trying to say that one very quickly. So basically, I'm just going to call it Zola's Spender. Zola's Spender is actually fantastic, and I slept on this and I thought it was okay. Playing it on the weekend for 4 rounds, I think this is an S tier spender, really. It is actually so good, and almost too good. Yeah, I was absolutely blown away about how good this was on the weekend. So just run through it. It is a range 3, 6 dice, 2 cost. I think that's what really got me. The fact that this is only a 2 cost, 6 dice energy attack, and it's also range 3. So as it reads, if this attack deals damage, which is the funny one, like you kind of want your Zola and Strucker around for the strategic genius to be able to reroll it here, but if this attack deals damage, after the attack is resolved, this character may advance the target character short. Now that's just this is pretty much the only real displacement in Hydra I found anyway. Like when I say real displacement, I think you know what I mean, like being able to actually move things around and do what you want with them. This one is killer, and the big one here is there is no size limit to it, so you can kind of just do whatever you want as long as you can push that 1 damage through. It also has wild slow, so the way that kind of works out is their repositioning is probably going to be, it's almost like a stagger, if you can think of it that way, where you get to walk them away short, and then they are also a short mover because they've been slowed. So the best example I can give here, like anecdotally, is the fact that I had Hulk within range 2 of me. He threw a big building at me, and I managed to live on, I think, 2 health. So what I did in return was I threw out one of these ESP box blasts. I walked him to be exactly at range 3 away, and then I shot him with another one. It only did 1 or 2 damage, but I was able to walk him away again short. So just being able to like double stagger your Hulks like that, and just push them away and just push them, functionally like out of the game. I think he ends up being about range 5 away then, once he's at range 3 and then walked away short again. He's just so far away from the action that you're just throwing him out of the game. So the summary there is the fact that this spender, absolutely magical. I love it, and if I'm playing Hydra, I'm putting Zola in my list almost every time for this spender. That's how much I enjoyed it. So we will just move on really quick. The experimental enhancements, I'll be honest with you, I never used this one. Maybe I should have, but it's a 3 cost, add 2 dice rolls to the next attack roll. It does have the caveat that if you roll any skulls, you will take a damage at the end of it. I don't think they needed to put that in. I think a 3 cost, add 2 dice is probably fine, especially if you look at things in the meta like Iron Man's cost 2 for +2 dice. I don't think you need to make a 3 cost plus 2 dice, and also you can hurt yourself. That seems a little bit silly to me, but it's also a little bit thematic with Hydra. I do feel, this is just, just talking randomly, I think if they wanted to put that little Hydra spice on the end of it, they probably could have got away with making it 2 cost. Probably the main reason you're taking Zola, though, is the Hydra engineering. It is quite simply pay power for rerolls. That's actually, and it's one of the best forms of it too. It's pay up to 3 and get that many rerolls. It is range 4. He can use it on himself as well. So it's just a very good and very useful reroll bubble. It does have the caveat at the end that if you roll any skulls, you will get bleed at the end of it. So I did have a couple of times where you'd roll your dice, you'd pick up, you've got 6 dice there, and there is a skull there which you can't reroll. If you're going to use Hydra engineering, you're going to have to take bleed at the end of it. The cool thing with Zola is he is immune to bleed, which is, just go to his immunity very quickly. Immunity to bleed and poison. Very handy when you're playing the poison stuff on Terrigen, and also having immunity to bleed. It's the most common status condition out there, so his immunities are actually very handy and relevant, especially with his Hydra engineering. But going back to the last episode as well, the combination of Hydra engineering and also having potentially 2 strategic genius bubbles, I did find that both the offense and defense of Hydra to be very smoothed out, and I think that's probably the biggest appeal to the affiliation, is having very smooth dice, because you're going to put your power in and you're going to have your normal strategic geniuses standing around, and you're just going to be able to have nice smooth dice rolls for the most part. Scientific hubris is definitely a great ability. A lot of people have it these days. It's just every time he rolls a crit, he gets a power. So it's very handy for if he wants to do pay to flips, even his madman, he's going to throw those 2 dice out there. If he gets a crit, he can refund a power. What I found it very good on is prototype weapons. So if he's spent down to 0 because he'd been doing a bunch of rerolls, even if you manage to get a crit on your 4 dice with your prototype weapons, he's going to be able to get 2 power, which means he'll also be able to do a box blast follow up. I do distinctly remember a couple of times I picked up my 4 dice and said to my opponent, I really need to roll a crit here, and you would just roll your 4 dice, and being able to roll a crit or not rolling a crit, it was the difference between having a box blast online or not having it online. His flip side, he just also has 6 on his injured side, so his flip side is exactly the same, just has some cooler art on it. But that is Zola wrapped up, and I will say with Zola, he's probably my favorite Hydra model, to be honest. I think outside of Red Skull, because of his grunts existing, he is going to be splashed. I think he could be splashed. I don't think he will be, but I think he actually could be splashed here and there. And he's something that I'm personally looking at and seeing where I can play him outside of Hydra, just because he was so effective for me on the weekend. And I think a lot of it comes down to working on that box blast and just seeing where that's going to be the most effective. I found his rerolls to be great. I'm not too sure how he's going to go in other affiliations, because I do think he does get the biggest glow up being in Red Skull Hydra because of the extra power he generates, which is therefore an extra reroll he can generate as well. But for the most part, I am very big on him, and I also enjoyed his scientific method tactics card too. And I'll get to that on Strucker, because every game that I played on the weekend, I put it onto Strucker just to test that one out as well. So with that, we might as well bring him up now. So we'll see you later, Zola, and let's bring up my least favorite Hydra model in the range, Baron Strucker. So I've kind of given that one how I feel, but let's run through him really quickly. So 433, that's pretty good stats for a 3 threat. Personally, I think it was the 5 health that kind of kicked me, because on his injured side as well, he's only 5 health, so a 10 health 3 threat is probably the thing that affected me the most personally in my game. So, but a 433 5 health character, yeah, he's okay, right? So his attacks, the Plasma Blast, I found it to be, again, just okay. A range 3 5 dice attack that has the Wild Incinerate. It's pretty good, and you do feel good when you hit that Wild Incinerate. It does have the Strategic Genius, so it is kind of a 6 dice in a way. So his spender is a 4 cost spender. It is only range 2, which is probably the biggest factor for me. It's a range 2 7 dice physical, which again, probably physical is the best defense usually for a lot of pep characters out there. After attack resolve, this character removes 1 damage from itself for each damage dealt. This actually came up once in one of my games where he had 3 damage on him, and I was able to push, I think it was 2 or 3 damage with his spender, and then also healing factor as well, and he got to heal up to full. That was actually pretty cool. The thing is though, what I find is he doesn't have a lot of ways to spend his power, and if you don't want to play that range 2 game, a lot of times his power is just kind of wasted. There was a game where I think I had 10 power on him for like 2 full rounds because I just couldn't do anything to spend it. I was playing against Hulk and Hulkbuster, and I just sat there with 10 power just thinking, well, this is great, I guess I'll spend arrogance just to try to remove 1 power off of me. Now, I do have to mention that my view of Strucker is also been viewed as someone who's never played him as a leader. I've never played Strucker as a leader. I'm free to admit that. I've only played him under Red Skull, so my view towards Strucker is definitely painted by that brush. I really should get into his leadership, though, because he is a leader. I think a lot of people should know what it does by now, but for the sake of it, let's just read it out. Once per turn, after the attack made by an allied character is resolved, if the attack dealt damage, the allied character may use his leadership ability. Choose one of the special conditions the allied character has. If the defending enemy character does not have that special condition, it gains the special condition, and the allied character loses that special condition. The very short version of that is, if I have bleed and I attack you and I deal damage, I'm going to put bleed onto you. The second part, which is actually exclusive to the first part. Additionally, once per turn, when an enemy character gains a special condition, the allied character that caused this special effect may remove 1 damage from itself. So the cool thing there is, if you have, let's just say Bucky, because he's very common, Bucky shoots someone, puts bleed on them, Bucky can heal a damage. And for someone who's played a lot of Sam Vengers, I actually do like the incidental healing here and there. It can be just enough to kind of like tilt the scales a little bit. My problem is, I do think the best thing in Hydra is Red Skull and his grunts, and I'm not too sure if you would ever play Red Skull and his grunts under Strucker. Maybe you do. Like I said, I've not played Strucker as a leader. I've only played him under Red Skull as a bit of a strategic genius bubble. So I'm not too sure how he would play with how Red Skull would play under the Hydra High Council leadership that Strucker offers. I'm not too sure how that one would play out. I don't think he doesn't really give out any conditions himself. So he's more of just a 5 threat with grunts to add into Strucker's list, which I think at that point you're probably better off taking Zola and Zemo and then adding a bunch of splash characters in there. But for the most part, I do think his leadership is, I would say it is good for a 3 threat, but I think generally speaking for a leadership for your whole affiliation, it's probably not that great. But for a 3 threat leader, it's probably not a bad affiliation. And of course, his leadership is the whole reason he has the Deathblow virus, which is other characters within range 3, which is actually a huge bubble when you really get down to it. A range 3 bubble to pop your poison means that everyone who he's giving strategic genius to is probably also getting poisoned, unless they have the immunity like Zola does. So I actually never used this one because I never played his leadership, and he was never in a position to use it offensively to only catch enemy models in the Deathball virus. So I was not very impressed with the Deathball virus superpower. I never managed to use it. Arrogance was okay. It's both characters get to count skulls in their dice rolls for your attack and successes sort of thing. So when he attacks, he can pop arrogance, and you get to add skulls to your dice roll. The only time I found it very useful, and the time I actually ever used it, was when he had the ESP leakage from Scientific Method on him, because the way the dice work out and the extra text onto ESP leakage is the fact that every time your opponent rolls a skull in their defense roll, they also take a damage. So it kind of mitigates the fact that they're counting as a success. It kind of just means that you're adding skulls to your successes, and your opponent is still taking a damage but counting successes. So the way it works out is a net positive if you're running ESP leakage, is the short version there. Probably his best thing on his card could be Strategic Genius, just another Zemo, range 2 reroll, attack and defense dice. As I spoke about a couple times during the last couple of videos, I did find the double Strategic Genius bubbles very handy if you want to fight on 2 fronts. You can't double up the Strategic Genius, just if you're going to use them together. That's not a thing, so don't bother trying to do that. The other thing he has is Healing Factor 1. I found this very handy for if you're playing cubes, just be able to pick up a cube with him, and then maybe also if you have X23 in your list, which is another thing I'll get to a little bit later. Just having that healing factor, just be able to pick up cubes and sit on them was very good. I do think if you're going to play him competitively, I'll probably look to put Exceptional Healing to list, because my biggest issue with him is the fact that he can't spend power relatively well. A lot of times I was using him to patch up my Red Skull, so he was my Tactics cards bunny bot, I guess, power bot. So that's what he was spending a lot of his power on. So I think he will definitely be able to have power to spend on Exceptional Healing if you manage to take him in your list. And if you're going to take Strucker and Exceptional Healing, you may want to think about putting 23 in list as well. So his flip side is pretty much exactly the same. It just has some cooler art as well. So it was the 5 health that kind of got me on this guy. I found that one to be just a real kicker for me. He just took a little bit of chip damage, and then he was in range for Bullseye to throw 2 darts at him and get the kill, or the daze or whatever. So I think overall he's probably a fine character. I shouldn't knock him too much. I just personally never got very good use out of him, except for re-rolling some dice here and there. So I think I think I said it before, if I was to play that event again, I think almost every game I would look to drop Strucker and put in X23 as my 3 threat, and then also use her as my my scientific method option as well. But that's it, guys. I think that's all Hydra wrapped up, so we can say goodbye to Strucker now. I'm not 100% sure where I want to go from here, if I want to look to start covering some Avengers, or if I want to look to start a new affiliation as well and get ready for some more in-person events locally, and I might still cover those ones in the videos. If anyone has any ideas, feel free to shout them out, and I will see what I can do. Until next time, cheers.